I am a huge fan of HELLBLADE SENUA'S Sacrifice. It is an extremely personal story of loss, heartache, abuse, and mental illness, even going so far as winning awards with how it presents psychosis, supposedly being an accurate representation of what living with that illness is. The combat, the mechanics, the look and feel of it, I thoroughly enjoyed when I was streaming it on my Twitch channel about 5 years ago. The setting, while not played out at this time, did set itself apart from the squeaky clean other representations of northern Scotland and even more northern groups, who would raid, pillage, and enslave each other. This world was brutal, visceral, and with the mix of SENUA'S psychosis, easily frightening. The beliefs of these people, Norwegian, Picts, Icelanders, and others, kind of believe the same things as the beliefs spread from travel, so this representation of their beliefs, while being somewhere else in reality, is a really cool idea. And to have the North's mythology told to Senua by the traveler was an awesome way to explain the universe a little more. So when its sequel, SENUA'S SAGA, was advertised at the 2019 Game Awards, I was pumped. Especially because they were using the music of Heilung in Maijan. Whose music is based on texts and runic inscriptions from Germanic peoples of the Iron and Viking Age, and in which this album is about, I believe, is about a peaceful village corrupted by war. The war drums are beating per se. This blends expertly with the imagery of HELLBLADE and what looked like Iceland, the beautifully brutal and barren land of ice and fire. We then saw a bunch of videos about development. It seemed like they had a close collaboration with Epic for Unreal Engine 5, showing that this game was definitely going to be a showpiece for their engine and its capabilities. Then, last year at the Game Awards, remember those? They actually brought Heilung in for a live performance, and another trailer from Ninja Theory. After this, I went dark on the game. After all this time, just put it in my hands, and I'll play it. I wake up from my coma of life in late May to see it is ready to play, and boy did I. Night 1, I fired up the game, and then about 6 or plus hours later, the game was complete. And man, do I have a lot of thoughts all jumbled around in my brain, but I'm going to try to explain my thoughts as well as possible. This game is an amazing art house cinema piece of art. From the acting, graphics, sounds, and setting, it really is a love letter to Iceland, just like the game director wanted. And they are trying new things, such as the combat. Now, I didn't change any settings on the game. I usually don't unless there is some aiming issues that I'm having on mouse and keys. But I usually don't mess with the difficulty. Trying to play the game as most people and the devs created the game to be played. Out of curiosity, after watching Dr. Disrespect play the game and change the difficulty, I actually took a look, and the game is on dynamic, which I thought was the cinematic way of playing. But it turns out that the game does dynamically change based on your skill. Pretty cool way to design a game, for sure. It has some type of machine learning on your local drives, and I would love for someone to take a look and see what data it collects and gives back to you. So if you looked into this, please let me know. The combat this time around is less like the original, and less like other games that have used this type of combat since. The newer God of Wars, for example. This combat is not the main draw of the game, but it does something that the last one didn't. It makes each fight a drag-out, drawn-out brawl. There isn't much to do besides blocking, dodging, light and heavy attack, but it feels like every enemy is presented to you as a formidable foe, and less like the easy enemy that Assassin's Creed or others present their enemies. The fights kind of move from one enemy to another, and each enemy has a transition period that some random action would happen. Such as you help a random person who needs it, or another enemy kills the dude you were fighting, then you have to fight this new dude. They said that they were inspired by the Battle of the Bastards from Game of Thrones, and I absolutely get that from this. Very well done. I really did enjoy the combat and tried not to rely on the special move of her mirror, which basically gets you out of any sticky situation. Get out of trouble free card, basically. But I can see why it's there, for people who just want to enjoy the story. Now, while I did enjoy the fighting, I wanted more of it, and more to do during it, I guess. It did give you a good amount of different enemies, but this was way different than the first. These are all human characters with different abilities, with small differences than before. Narratively, it makes sense since this takes place a lot in the real world per se, with skins of SENUA'S psychosis bleeding through. Not like the first game where you were fighting monstrous foes and creatures. There were also times where combat kind of reset, and you see a character kind of shrink and everyone kind of goes back into place, and SENUA glides over the ground to set up the next fight. I think it was the game trying to put you where you should be, but that did break the immersion for me. So overall, I dig what they were cooking here for combat. But there may need to be more work with the machine. The graphics are gorgeous. It is insane what they are doing with Unreal, and I can't wait to see what everyone else is going to do with this. This game is a freaking showpiece and should be used in every one of their marketing materials. It really sells you on the world of HELLBLADE. Almost photoreal in some points, which had me out loud asking if it's live action. Especially on the models and animations of the characters. These characters are treated as well as real people, and are given care with their designs and animations. You can tell they did a lot of work here and it shines off the screen. The water at some parts looks okay. You can tell they use fire effects that don't look the best, but almost everything else is top notch. The sound? Give this team all the awards. The sound mixing, music, and voice or voices, and everything else really matches well with the graphical world and characters that are presented here. The setting is given full life, with the sound really selling you on the immersion of the world. Again, amazing work here. The music that intertwines with the boss fights as well is beautiful and intense, really reminding me of a primal Hans Zimmer score kind of. The in-gun boss encounter in the volcano is particularly memorable, getting more and more intense as the action and pain get more intense. You really feel the heart-beating fury in this encounter. Speaking of the setting, as I stated before, this is a love letter to Iceland, where the director and many of the staff, including the main actress and Ninja Theory member Melina Jurgens, who before the first Hellblade was just a German freelance photographer and video editor. They all went to Iceland and learned a lot about the culture and setting, as well as different fighting techniques of the 9th century warriors of this era. The 9th century, holy crap. To think about this being that time setting, it's insane. Anyways, they did an amazing job with all of this, and you do feel the landscape. But I did get very sad when we went underground. While the caves are beautiful and I understand their importance to the story, I wanted a little more from the environment above ground. Maybe in real life they went to the caves and heard a tale about what they would do or who they thought lived down there. So maybe this was important to the story that they wanted to tell. It just seemed uninteresting to me. Now, the bad. Yes, this isn't a perfect game. The puzzles are... I don't know. I don't know if they're for me. I get that they are there as something to do while running around, but I didn't particularly find them fun or hard. So, if those two things aren't being met, then what is it really accomplishing? I don't know, maybe I'm missing the point of them. Like, she can see things that aren't there. The Northmen call her a seer, so she walks between worlds kind of thing with her illness. I'm not sure if I get the puzzles this time around. And their frequency within the runtime of around 6 hours for me seemed to slow the game down. I don't know, let me know your comments and your thoughts on the puzzles if you like them or not. And finally, let's talk about the story. So if you didn't want things spoiled, I'd go away now. And thank you for watching. The story this time around takes place again in the 9th century, with Senua getting willingly captured by northern slavers and taken across the sea so that way she could free her people. Her ship is destroyed and she ends up killing all the slavers on the boat except for one, who is our first sort of boss. She beats him and then takes him prisoner so that he can lead her to his settlement. Along the way they find a different settlement that was destroyed by the Draugr. I'm not sure how to say it. But they are cannibalistic and fierce barbarians. She follows the devastation until she finds the Draugr camp, in which she finds a new character who is being held captive, Fargrimir. She supposedly feels his importance on her journey and then saves him and others from the camp. You can already see the difference between the first Hellblade with this here. Rather than being a personal, isolating journey, this journey is going to have her interacting with the outside world, which again is one of the goals of the creators. Not only show her psychosis within her own mind on her own, but how she deals with things in the real world and with real people. In the middle of that fight, the Draugr kind of summon a giant who then swallows them up whole. Fargrimir explains that a volcano went off and separated the line between the worlds of Midgard and Jotunheim, allowing the giants into the world. And he believes that Senua is a seer because she hears voices. He then sends her to find the hidden folk, which live underground, and they may know the giant's weakness. After passing multiple tests, which are a bunch of the puzzles that I mentioned earlier, the hidden folk then tell Senua a tale of a woman named Ingun who left her kid with the hidden folk, thinking that the kid would be safe, and in her anger sought power to survive, and which turned her into a furious giant. Senua confronts her with her real name and returns the bones of her infant to her, turning her into stone. Seeing her victorious against the giant, the former enslaver joins Senua in her journey, now believing in her fully. Basically, that's the gist of the story, is that she gathers a band of people together who start believing in her, and she kind of starts becoming the leader of a group. Which leads me into the next portion, where there is another giant, this one with water, with the sea. Again, we have to research and learn about this giant before we're able to summon it with its name, call it by its name. And this is the part that you see inside a cave and the ocean on one side, with Senua gathering people together to attack it. Narratively, I'm not sure how I feel about Senua knowing the giant's name, but then sending a bunch of people to their death, thinking that they're fighting them. I'm not sure how I feel about that. We learn that this giant gave up his village so that way he could be protected. So after that, he is basically banished and cast out to live at the sea, in which he then becomes a giant. We have another sequence where we have to encounter the ocean versus the volcano, and we make our way to the center of the storm, in which we find him and call him by his name, and he then turns to stone. After this, we get one of our other members to follow along with us, since she now believes in Senua and her journey. We make our way through a forest, which kind of confuses them. I know this is supposed to be a part where we learn a little bit more about teamwork and that kind of thing, but for some reason this part really does fall flat for me. And then we finally meet the enslaver dude's dad, who we find out from the hidden folk that he is actually the final giant, and he created the giant. He has been enslaving people for their own good and sacrifices. That way he could stay in power. This fight was cool because you do live in the psychosis with Senua, and as you fight this dude's dad, and then you break out of it and you see that you've been fighting in this ring with all of the townsfolk watching you. And after revealing that he made up the giant, they kind of turn on him and they even push him back out into the circle so he can fight Senua. This fight's very emotional and you come out victorious. You are now the de facto leader of these people, in which Senua then has a conflict with her darkness, with her father's darkness. She used to think that the darkness living within her was her mom, with her illness, but it's in fact her father, who is the darkness living within her. She fears what she will become, basically becoming him, but in the end she does say that she is her own person and that she can choose who to be. And that we still have more story to tell. This is SENUA'S Saga. The story is about 5.5 hours to 6 hours, and with that, it kind of basically shows her becoming the leader of her people. So, what's my take on it? Each of the giants represents a part of Senua and something that she needs to overcome, with the first being a woman with so much fury who needs to be calm. The second is an outcast who needs to have acceptance, and the third who needs to rule, not by fear. I like the idea of having her with and interact with other people. I think that is something new for Senua to go through. But for a lot of the time, we're just traversing this stuff alone anyways. And it's only in the fights and in the cutscenes that she's with other people. So I'm not the biggest fan of the way that the story was told, and I really don't have much ideas on how to fix it. I do like how Senua gets out of this, and she's able to be stronger because of overcoming, or not overcoming, her darkness. I guess the whole point of this was to not overcome the darkness, but to live with it and to understand it and to see it, but not have it take over her as it took over the slaver dude's dad. I don't know. I think that's about it. Let me know your thoughts on the story if you're this far watching in the video. Overall, I do think this story is worth the price of entry, especially if you have Xbox Game Pass, which is the monthly subscription, versus a $49.99 price tag. Although, with how expensive movies are around me, a $49.99 price tag for a 6-hour game for 6-hour cinematic experience isn't that bad at all. So if you have Game Pass, or if you're interested in SENUA'S story after the first game, I would give you a recommendation to play. I think there's enough enjoyment out of it that you'll have a good time with it. And the imagery and the artwork on the screen is worth the price of admission. Thank you so much for watching the video. If you like what I do here, feel free to subscribe. Also, feel free to smash the like button, as it really does help the channel. Let me know your thoughts on SENUA'S Saga HELLBLADE 2 down in the comments below. If you didn't like it, I thank you for watching this long and hope you have a great day.